Well, everybody, this is the Babylon Bee interview show.
Oh, wait, I stepped on you.
That's okay.
Try again.
That's all right. This was fun. It was a good natural intro.
Oh, that was the beginning?
We're just
in.
talking.
Oh.
Yeah. We're sitting here with Brett and
I like
Erin
that the
Kunkle.
cameras come in and we're all talking and laughing. Oh, we didn't see you there.
Oh, hello there.
Welcome.
We have a pipe and we're sitting by the fire.
Yeah.
We didn't see you there. We're sitting here with Brett and Erin Kunkle.
Yes, we are. Brett and Erin Kunkle of Maven, which is a movement of students who know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty. And Brett Kunkle used to work at Stand to Reason with Greg Kokel, with their associates Ben Kronkle and Jim Kukel.
Is that true?
People used to ask me all the time, like, what's it like to work with your dad? You know, because Kokel and Kunkles. And
Oh, yeah, you guys do kind of look related. You have like the chin. The little,
You got the chin.
the divot, the little cleft,
div.
yeah.
Go ahead and
Doesn't he
say
have
it. Go ahead and say it. Butt chin. That's what it
No,
is.
it's not a butt. It's like, well, maybe like a dog. That was going to get graphic. I'm just saying there's not a crack. It's just it's a pinpoint.
Matt, can we
It's
get a
good.
side-by-side of the two chins? Like an overlay, please?
But so I got tired of people asking me, like, well, what's it like to work with your dad? So I was like, oh, he's not my dad. He's my grandpa. And they're like, really? Someone asked me to sign his book once. Like, oh, could you sign your book? So I signed it. Said, this book sucks. Greg. No, I didn't do that. Greg, if you're listening, I did not do
Thought
that.
about it.
Sad. So Maven, that sounds like a heavy metal band or something. How did you come up with that?
Yeah, well, Maven is someone who is knowledgeable in a particular area, an expert, and then they seek to pass that knowledge on to others. Okay. And so we started Maven 2.5 years ago, so we're still kind of in the startup mode, but we just saw the huge need to reach young people in particular with the Christian worldview, to equip them, to disciple them, to navigate the culture and the challenges. And so we wanted a name that didn't sound like scholarly or goofy Christian and so we're
Dorky.
Yeah, dorky. That's
Inspired teen.
actually it's dorky to say dorky now.
Oh.
That's kind
Is
of
it?
out. Yeah, I
Lame.
don't think
We didn't want to lame.
yeah, that's,
It'll come back.
Yeah, some lame cross pun.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cross-eyed.
Cross.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So anyway, it captures what we want to do. We want to pass on Christian knowledge to the next generation. And so our two target audiences are young people, teenagers, and then the people who disciple teenagers, parents and youth workers and pastors in particular, Christian educators.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what we do.
You guys do like a lot of flannel graphs and stuff like that?
Definitely.
Totally into flannel graphs.
It works so well
And
for our
showing-
own kids at home, the flannel graphs.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
really
And then
like-
showing them a lot of VeggieTale videos.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, modern flannel graph trying to explain like modern worldviews to Christian teens would be interesting. You would need a lot of new little characters and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like maybe an Antifa
Yeah.
group that's like,
Here's the fire one again.
because they always had that same crowd in the flannel graph.
Yeah.
That was the same crowd that was
Yes.
like following Moses
Oh,
around,
that's
and that was
right.
the same one that was listening to Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just
And
kept,
then the same one crucifying Jesus.
yeah, it's the same crowd because they could only afford the one.
So you just need a crowd with black helmets and goggles.
Yeah.
And you just keep using it.
Yeah.
You just add helmets and stuff to the crowd. Another.
That could be a new strategy for reaching the next generation.
Yeah. It's like felt Minecraft. Yeah.
Flannel
call that,
craft. I don't know. So you work with teenagers and stuff. Like why?
Yeah. Why would you want to? Why would you want to?
What's
do
wrong
that?
with you?
Why
And
would we want to do that? Well, we have a
like
few.
willingly, you do this willingly.
We have a few of our own. We're parents of 5 kids.
Wow.
So
5.
yeah.
That's a lot.
You
News
sound
to
like
you.
this is new information.
I was
Sounds
aware.
like he's the one who gave birth
I
to
was
them or
aware of
something.
like 3 or 4. But jeez. I guess that's,
So yeah, we have 5 of our own. So we're definitely in the world of parenting, and we did youth ministry for a lot of years. He was a youth pastor when I met him, but then together we did it youth ministry for a while too. So we're just in this world and realize how challenging it is to raise kids. And then we do like the teenage age. A lot of people are repelled by teenagers and just kind of hold their breath and hope they make it through those years with their kids. But we do enjoy that age and the time of kind of questioning and figuring things out on their own. Now, we don't enjoy it all the time. I remember when my oldest son was starting to, I guess he was 12 or 13, but really starting to argue with me on everything. And it was super annoying. And one time, Brett's out of town, and I call him like, he's just arguing. He just wants to argue everything. And he's like, well, you remember what stage he's at, right? He's at that stage where they just question everything and want to debate and want to think through it. And so it was a good reminder, because I'm like, oh yeah, we're supposed to like this. We're supposed to actually pull this out of our kids and let them ask questions and not be annoyed by it.
Yeah, I had to guide you through a lot of parenting.
That was a one time.
I'm glad you had me. Because, well, it started in youth ministry. It did junior high ministry, did high school ministry, did college ministry, and we really first went into it for the money.
Right.
And the free pizza.
Yeah. Then realized it didn't pay much, and so thought, I guess we should invest in these guys' lives anyway. I think they're at the stage where they can think well,
So generous, man.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe you're just blinded by the money. But,
teenagers don't watch our show, so you can.
Oh, okay. So we can
bash them.
Yeah, I'll just be honest.
Yeah, there's one in this room, but we bash him to his face.
He can't hear us. He's on his phone.
And that's why we're trying to reach them, because they're addicted to screens. I don't even know what I was going to say. Probably. Oh no! So
probably profound.
I know it was. I'm trying to recapture it. There was something about working with young people that they're at the stage where they're thinking about the big questions, and they're on the cusp of making some big decisions. They're very malleable. They can be formed fairly easy, where sometimes working with adults can be a real pain in the rear in terms of that kind of stuff. And there's some of that innocence, particularly with younger, like with junior hires. I don't know, high schoolers are not that innocent anymore, but there's just a kind of innocence of life and still an optimism. And then you can form them, and
you can mold their foolish little brains.
We can indoctrinate them into our cult-like faith. No, but I think it was really it's just fun to watch them when they're given solid Christian knowledge and worldview and truth, and they learn how to defend it, not only know what they believe, but why they believe it. And you see their faith kind of come to life, because then they start to own it for themselves. It's no longer, hey, this is what mom and dad believe, and I was just raised in it. But no, this stuff is, I believe it. I'm really owning my own faith. That's one thing I love about working with teenagers. That could be the only thing, though.
So I was listening to you on another podcast because I was trying to research for the show and be ready. And
was it a better podcast than this one?
Those guys were quick. Yeah. You had said something to the effect of, trying to reach kids even before they're teenagers. You said when they're 2, when they're 5. And the first thought that came to my head, like, I don't even know how to talk to a 2 or 5-year-old about apologetics or any kind of reasoning, But I'm fascinated by the idea. And do you have thoughts on that? Like, how do you talk about I guess getting to actually what you teach partially is important, but how do you approach that with those younger kids? Because one thing that happened to me, we have a 13-year-old daughter. She's my stepdaughter. And she was like the perfect, most easy child ever. And it was almost like a wall went up like overnight. Like I always thought, I'd see her, start asking some questions and then we could talk about it. It wasn't like that. I was like, grr. Suddenly she's like ideologically changed overnight. Mm-hmm. And I did start to go, I should have been talking about this stuff earlier in her life. Yeah. And one thing that keeps me from doing that is that my parents never did that. I came to my faith completely on my own. So I always feel like I'm kind of pushing things when I get like that. It feels really awkward for me. So yeah, I guess just suggestions on how do you approach those topics with a young kid.
I think, well, for one thing, that was my experience too. Like once I grew up in a Christian home, but once I got into junior high, I did kind of decide just to do my own thing and didn't care about it. So yeah, when we get to that stage with our kids, then like you mentioned, you realize, oh, maybe we should actually talk about this kind of stuff before they get to this stage. And I do think as the cultures change, our parents, at least when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s, there was still with our parents just kind of a trust of the culture. They let us watch stuff on TV, listen to music. There wasn't a lot of, and then just trying to kind of trusted the public school that what they were teaching at home was reinforced at school. That wasn't happening, but I don't think, my parents were aware of how much stuff was changing. And so then as we now are parents, and I know how it was when I was in school, knowing, oh, it's quite different now too, you realize it does need to start earlier as far as being intentional about how we're training our kids, because out there in the world, they're very intentional about targeting our kids and teaching them a different worldview than what we're wanting.
I think it really took messing up our first two kids. They were the guinea pigs. We messed two up. We're like, okay, you got three more shots.
That's why you got to have a lot.
Yeah.
Because you got to have odds. Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, exactly. Because if a couple walk
It's a roll
away,
of the
we're
dice.
like, hey, we still got three. We're still, more than 50%. So I think one way to think about this is that you've got these different levels of development, intellectual development and moral development in children. And just as a very simple breakdown, I think you can look at those earlier ages, kind of the elementary school, 0 to, let's say, 10, kind of 4th, 5th grade, as the emphasis in terms of their discipleship and owning their faith is teaching them what to believe, right? So that's where you want to teach them the what. Now, when they get into junior high, this is where their minds begin to develop. They begin to be able to think abstractly. They start questioning. This is what we saw with kids, our kids, is that, they start pushing back. And sometimes we would take that as a threat to our authority, which sometimes it is. But often it's because their minds are developing and growing, and they're no longer just interested in the what, but they want to know the why now. And I remember doing this with my parents. My dad would, he'd say certain things that he kind of always said, and I'd be like, well, is that really true? Like, why do you think that, Dad? And so there's this kind of pushing, but it's a healthy sense of asking questions, wanting to know the reasons for things. So this is the where you teach them the why. And then I think the third stage is really kind of in the high school years. You're teaching them the how-to. This is where you take the what and the why, kind of put it together, and then see how it works in real life. And this is where giving high school students real life experiences with their faith, however that looks, is really important. And so at those earlier stages, you're laying that foundation. And frankly, when you look at Christian adults today, most of them don't even know the what, right? Or the what is just, it's like this shallow. Right. So it turns out that the what of Christianity is love Jesus and be good. And that's about it. And it's just repackaged in different ways, right? But what we want to do is give them good theology. I mean, that's really the what at those earliest of ages. It's theology. It's the study of God. It's the study of Scripture. And so that's what you're kind of laying in that foundation, those foundational years. So with your 2, your 3-year-old, you're doing things like very practically, like a catechism. For a lot of, I think, contemporary Christians or evangelical Christians, the idea of catechism sounds like a Catholic thing or something. We just don't have a whole lot of experience with that in our tradition. Catechism is simply taking our theology and putting it in question and answer form. And it's great for young children because young children have these minds that are like these steel traps, and they can memorize so much. And they don't understand it all, but that's okay because you're going to keep building on it. But you're laying this foundation of theology. And then as they really come to know the what, things like God's attributes, right? When I go and speak to high schoolers nowadays, I'll do a test. I'll say, okay, list for me all of God's attributes, right? That kind of tell us who he is. And typically high school students will get 6 or 7 down on a piece of paper. And frankly, it's not much better with Christian adults either. And then I'll say, well, here's a list from just a standard systematic theology book, and it's 25. And all you could think of were these 6, and typically they're repeats. It's like, well, God is loving, God is caring, God, and it's just, and they miss the vast majority of his attributes, and so how can we not see that young people and adults, any of us who don't know much about God, are going to have a very deep relationship with God? It's like, if you ask me about Erin, like, hey, tell me about your wife. And I said, oh yeah, Erin, she's got, blonde hair, brownish hair. She's 5'6". She's got 2 eyes. Yeah, that's Erin. You'd laugh, and then you'd say, no, tell me about Erin. And if I said, no, that's all I got, you would conclude something about the nature of our relationship. It's not very deep. There's not much richness there, or there's not a whole lot of a relationship. And in the same way, I think that's how it is. Our lack of knowledge about God reveals how shallow our faith is. And so on those early stages, you're just trying to pour that knowledge in and let them memorize those things, and let them memorize scripture and attributes of God and all these, in catechism. And then you're going to build on that. And then the junior high years is when they're asking the why. So you capitalize on that. In fact, with our kids, I like to prompt the why. I don't want to necessarily sit back and wait. So when they're 10, 11, 12, I want to be the one who's pushing them to ask the why questions. So I remember our daughter Ella, who's number 4, we were driving in the car, and I think she was like 10. And so I just said, hey, Ella, wait, why do you think that God exists? Why do you think there's even a God? And, she looked at me like, what are you talking about, Dad? And,
Oh, Dad.
yeah. Oh, Dad. Oh, Dad. And I said, her answer was, well, because you've told me, you've taught me that. I'm like, okay, can Dad be wrong?
Good job.
Yeah. I'm like, gosh. And she's like, I'm like, can Dad be wrong? And she said, well, no. And I was like, oh, okay, well.
Correct.
Nailed.
Correct again. Yeah, I'm nailing this discipleship thing.
I should start a company called Maven.
She's like, well, of course you could be wrong. I said, all right, let's just say maybe, I don't know what I'm talking. No, that wasn't plausible at all. I said, well, maybe Dad doesn't know what he's talking about, or do you have reasons for yourself? Besides Dad told you so. And she's like, well, I don't know. And so I'm trying to push the why, because ultimately I want her to believe the stuff because she is convinced that it's true, objectively true, and not just because Mom and Dad said so. Because that kind of faith, if that's your reasoning, if that's your justification, that's not going to survive in a culture that's very, it's coming after your faith.
Right.
So that's that junior high stage where then you're provoking the why. And that one, I think, is one of the most threatening for parents, because they're scared of the why, number one, because they can't answer the why questions. But then number 2, to let your kid doubt and express their doubt is a scary thing.
Right.
And I get it. But that look, every human is going to, every believer is going to doubt. And not just every believer, but I think every human struggles with doubt. The atheist struggles with doubt just like the believer struggles with doubt. And so that's navigating that is really important by giving them reasons why. And then I think before they leave our homes, we have to give them opportunities to kind of live this out. Whether that's taking them, like when we were youth pastors, we would take our junior high, we'd do a series on Buddhism, teach them about Buddhism, and do a kind of a fair assessment. Hey, here's what Buddhism teaches. Here are the problems with it, and then we take them to a Buddhist temple and have a monk give us a tour. And then the kid, that's when students really light up.
Own some monks.
Yeah, we're like, go own these
Crush
Buddhist
the
monks.
monks with facts and logic.
Them. Get in their face.
Or as simple, really, as when the Mormons knock on your door or Jehovah's Witness, don't slam it in their face. As parents, invite them in, have your kids sit down too, and let them just listen to you interact with people who have a different faith, or have the neighbors over that are Muslim, or, or atheists or whatever, and let your kids watch you have a dialogue about your faith. And that will spark questions, but it will also be teaching them that you're not afraid to engage in other ideas, and you're modeling respect. It's teaching them all kinds of stuff. So for parents, there are ways that just right around us that you can show your kids that the Christian faith isn't one that is afraid of other ideas, and that we're happy to have conversations about spiritual things with anybody. So even if you don't have a youth group that you can do that with, or you can, all the people around us, for sure. So and there are some good resources, even when your kids are young, that you can use to teach at home. This was something that felt intimidating to me because, as I said, I didn't come to faith till later in life, till I was graduating high school. So when it came to teaching my kids now, it was intimidating. And, Brett was a pastor, so maybe he should just do it. And, but I knew I needed to be a part of it too. So, just starting to read the Bible with the kids, and not feeling like I had to necessarily prepare to have all these questions answered. But as questions came up with the kids, I would say, oh, that's a really good question. I have no idea why Jesus answered, that way to that person. But let's figure out why he did that, or why did God do this in the Old Testament? It doesn't make sense to me either. So let's figure it out. Things like that. And then, there's all kinds of resources for kids. One book that I'm in with our two younger kids is called Theology, and it's like a theology book for kids. And it was talking about God being in control. And then as we were talking about the idea of, is God in control or is he in charge? And there's kind of a difference to that. Like, is God in control of all of us? Are we like a chessboard or something where he's moving all the pieces and we don't really have a lot of control of what's happening? Or is God in control? Is he sovereign over everything? And our 8-year-old was really thinking through and asking a lot of questions even in that. So, there are some resources out there. And I think that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, where you're purposeful about engaging your kids in it. And then when you run into problems, finding resources and not being afraid to say, gosh, that's a really good question. I have no idea. And I never thought about that.
Yeah, I'm just curious how that discussion ended. Did you get Jonah to repudiate Reformed theology?
I assume he became a Calvinist and grew a long beard and started drinking craft beer.
Yeah, and drinking IPAs.
Yeah.
God is determining everything. Just
hopefully,
I cannot have a Calvinist in my home.
It sounds like you have to be like confident in your own faith to talk to your kids. And it's like unsurprising, but people that have weak faith or can't question their own faith are going to have problems talking to their kids because, if you've got those doubts and you're not comfortable enough to talk about them, what makes you think your kids are going to be?
Yeah, and there's a balance there, because I think some people might hear it and go, well, that means I've got to know everything.
I got a ton of homework to do.
Yeah, and there's a good part of that, because I think most of us who have grown up in the typical evangelical church, we probably do have a lot of homework to do, because our churches have been so lacking in developing our faith intellectually. In fact, even to talk about that often sounds foreign to Christians nowadays. That our love for God is intellectual in nature. I mean, Jesus says in the Great Commandment to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And so the mind is included in there, and so it's not just the affections or kind of an emotional response, but there's an intellectual love that we have for God, and that needs to be developed and cultivated. And part of that is in our knowledge of who He is. So, in one sense, yes, we have homework to do, and it's not just for the sake of our kid. It'll help, bring alive our faith. It'll deepen our faith and our trust ultimately in God. But then there's another side where we want to say, hey, if you don't know something, that's okay. If your kid asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, that's okay. But the best thing to do in that situation is not to shut it down, not to ignore it, because I guarantee you, if you shut down your kids' doubts or questions, they don't stop questioning. They don't stop doubting. They just stop coming to you if you shut it down. And so there's plenty of other people who want to answer those questions for them. They'll Google it. They'll ask Siri. They'll go to their buddy, whatever. And so we can never shut down their questions. But we need to be able to have the humility to say, I don't know. That's a great question. I haven't thought about that, and I need to. So let's do this together. And a lot of learning, I think we've learned through parenting, that a lot of the learning is learning with our kids. And that is something really good about that, because it models for them this teachability, this humility that we want them to have, and this openness to the truth and pursuing the truth. So that's okay. So there's kind of a both and.
Yeah, because if anyone knows that we don't know everything, it's our kids, right? Like they see us every day.
My kids have never said that about me.
Yeah, man. It's like same. I got my 13-year-old daughter, and it's like anything we say immediately is discredited by the fact that we said it.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
And then with it, I'd love to talk about social media and all that stuff. Like she just recently, we've been in a big debate about limiting her screen time, phone usage, social media stuff. Very contentious. She found a lady on TikTok who's this woman, this blue-haired lady who has like over 1 million followers, and she says this is how to parent, and she tells everybody how to parent, and it's give kids unlimited screen time, don't censor them all, never check their phones, that's their journal, all this stuff, exactly what kids want to hear.
Yeah.
And so obviously she has millions of followers. She's telling junior hires exactly what they want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she's sending us these videos and saying, see, this is how a good mom is. So it's like people that you would never have to associate with now can get to your kids through social media and indoctrinate them just by them being on there scrolling.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
what do you even do with that? Because I struggle with over censoring my kids, and I don't want them to just go out into the world and, my mom didn't censor me much. So that's the other thing for me. We didn't have sit down talks about this stuff.
Yeah.
And so, it's such a different mind frame for me to try to be that way.
Yeah. And I think the blue-haired lady on TikTok, like, why not watch it with your daughter? Say, oh, okay, you think she has some good stuff to say? I'll watch it with you. And then dialogue about it. And let's just start with, does blue-haired lady even have kids?
Yeah. And she has a step-kid, I believe is what she said. Okay.
And then take what she's saying. So let's find out who she is, what's she talking about, and then go through her ideas of what she's saying. And do you really think that's good? Well, do you think that would be good for me as a dad to just have unlimited screen time, always be distracted by, because that's as parents too, where when we're talking to our kids about something and they become older, our hypocrisy is going to come out. And maybe we do have hypocrisy that we need to talk about. And of course, there is a difference between parent and child. Of course, a lot of Brett's work is on the computer. So it's okay if dad's working on the computer. It doesn't mean that therefore then all the kids get as much screen time as dad does. He's not on TikTok. He's working.
I have to scroll through TikTok for my work. It's research. Gotta stay on top of culture.
I'm just researching.
Totally.
All the kids are playing Fortnite, so.
But the screen accountability thing, that with our oldest daughter, I remember when we got pushed back from her and the whole privacy thing. Well, what about my privacy? And so that conversation, especially that Brett had with her, was, well, what if I made that claim to mom about my phone or my computer? What if I said to mom, hey, this is my stuff. This is privacy. I need my privacy. And he said to her, what do you think? How do you think mom would respond to that if she didn't know my passwords? And she was like, that you were hiding something, and he was like, exactly, which is why I I don't get to claim privacy on my screens and stuff. And in the same way, we're your parents, we're watching over you, so you don't get to claim privacy. You get to have privacy when you go to the bathroom, when you're showering. There are times for privacy.
Changing your clothes.
But when it comes
After
to
a certain
technology,
age, you get that.
Yeah.
yeah,
Actually,
we're happy when they want privacy. Oh, good, I don't have to
at
help
young
you.
enough ages, they don't want privacy. They just walk out or walk around the house naked.
Naked, yeah.
That's my 2-year-old right now. Never wants clothes on.
That's right.
Our youngest 8-year-old we had recently read through the Adam and Eve story, and he's been mad at them ever since, and mad that they sinned and messed up the world. And he said to me the other day, just over breakfast, he's like, I'm so mad at Adam and Eve. If they hadn't have done that, we could all be naked right now. And he's like sitting there in board shorts. I'm like, are you just so confined? You just feel so confined by your
I'm scared
clothes.
for that kid's future. He's heading down the wrong road. I don't think you've parented him well enough. I'm going to have to step in.
Yeah.
No, I with the screen stuff, that is the biggest challenge. In fact, we do an annual conference to help equip parents and educators and youth pastors on how do we help our kids navigate the culture. And our last one was on technology. In fact, today on our website, we put up the video for people to purchase the talks from that, because this is, I mean, the whole conference was on issues of technology, social media, just thinking through the power and the nature of technology, thinking about, the sexualization that comes through technology. So it's a huge area to navigate. And I think for parents, maybe a helpful way to think about it, and this is an analogy that I use often in terms of thinking about just parenting and the long-term goal. And the analogy I use is surfing. I grew up in Southern California. I've been surfing all my life. And when we got married, I thought it'd be amazing to one day, teach my kids how to surf. And so with our oldest, who's, our guinea pig and everything, it was kind of throw her out there. And I realized you don't put a 2-year-old on a surfboard, push him in the water and say, go for it.
So you lost one.
So we lost one. Yeah, I'm sure that's why she doesn't surf. Actually, I remember in junior high, she took a big wipe out, and she's like, "I'm never doing this again," and she hasn't. So I've disowned her. But the other one, so there's hope. So I realized, okay, if I want to teach my kid how to surf, what's the long-term goal? The long-term goal is that they paddle out into the ocean all by themselves without dad. And they navigate the waters and the waves on their own. They can surf on their own. They don't need me anymore. And in the same way, that's kind of my goal in raising my kids to live in this world as followers of Jesus, is that I want them to eventually go out there and live on their own, all by themselves, navigating the culture with their faith, not just intact, not just hanging by a thread, but they're thriving as followers of Jesus. And so I realized, though, the first step in teaching my kid how to surf was actually learning how to protect them. I had to protect them from the ocean. And it's great to have moms kind of helping, I think, dads on these, because I'm like, let's go, let's push them. And she's like, take it a little easier on them. And so there's protection. You keep them in the shallows. You put them on your back. You lay on the board. You go in the foam, where it's real gentle. And then slowly, eventually, you're getting them out there further and giving them more experience. But even in that protection, the goal is not just protection. The goal is protection so that I can teach and train and equip them to know things about the ocean, to learn about surfboards, to get some experience. And I'm slowly taking them out kind of further and further, giving them more experience, until eventually they're now paddling out with me, and I'm right beside them and pushing them into waves. But eventually then they learn how to surf on their own. And so notice, if all I did was protect them, they would never be able to surf on their own. So I've got to do other things besides protection. Protection is the short-term goal. Navigating it, the water is the long-term goal. In the same way, I think we've got to think about our kids that way, is that early on, I think we have to give them a lot of protection, particularly in an aggressive secular culture where technology is seeping in. You can't shut your doors and lock the kids in anymore. I mean, culture is just seeking them out in all these different ways. So there has to be some healthy protection. but not just protection for protection's sake. It's so that they can kind of develop some moral character, virtue, they can build strength. And so there's protection. So I think for when it comes to technology, early on, lots of protection, keeping kids off of, screens as much as possible so that you can develop them in other ways so that eventually when they get into those ages where they're navigating social media, they maybe have some moral fortitude to do that well. And of course, there's going to be lots of ups and downs in it. But the protection has to be accompanied by teaching and training. So getting your kid to even think about the nature of technology. Like we will have conversations with our kids to get them to think about, hey, owning a smartphone, is that immoral? No, it's not wrong to own a smartphone. But just you using that thing will shape you in a lot of different ways, and then kind of narrating that for them. Like, hey, this is always pushing you in a different direction. It has no neutral gear. It's always moving forward, backward, to the side, and it's going to pull you and drag you. And here are the different ways that it'll do that. And then talking through some of the I think laying out for them kind of a vision. Ultimately, we want to see them not controlled by this. And sometimes we'll just even cite the data, of kids who experience the negative effects of technology, the anxiety and depression that's correlated with, excessive use. But ultimately wants you to be in control of this thing and not it to control you. And so I think there's a lot of protection early on. And then I think helping our kids see that it's a privilege, not a right. And, and kind of viewing it that way, because I think a lot of kids just kind of say, well, everyone else has it. And so I deserve one too. And that's where we have to, there's the challenge of teaching our kids and kind of developing almost an alternative culture in our homes that as followers of Jesus, we're different. And we may have to start that very early on, like we're going to be different than the world. We're going to be different. And getting your kids to really begin to get comfortable with that idea that you're going to be different than the people around you if you want to follow Jesus faithfully. And that's okay. And, so there's so much to talk about on technology.
Yeah, and it could be a whole episode.
Technology is like this giant shark while your kid's surfing.
Yeah.
It's going to eat them. But then you can teach them to tame the shark and
right on top of it.
Yeah.
surf. I'm
Shark
trying to
fighter.
make the analogy work.
Surf
I don't
the
know.
shark.
Yeah.
Punch it.
I don't know how deep you take that analogy, but
Put a leash on the great white and no, that analogy doesn't work.
what's your take on
The great white fragility.
That's what it is. What's your take on youth groups? And I know you guys said you did youth pastoring and stuff, but what's I know that there's kind of some people that are more hardcore and are youth groups are parents are surrendering the raising of their children and discipleship to the youth pastor. Then you have people that go the other way and just pull up to church on Wednesday night, throw their kids out the door and drive off and, hope that the youth pastor does everything. So what role do you see youth pastors and youth ministries playing?
Yeah, that's a good question because
our youth pastors are probably going to listen.
Did
to this.
have a different.
Be careful, Erin.
I did have a different view doing youth ministry, before having kids that were in that age. But as we've had kids and they've gotten older and, because I do think there is that split of parents who are really dependent on the youth ministry to help us out here. And I do think that's appropriate. The church this is the purpose of the church to be, to help one another. And so youth ministry can do that. I think the problem with a lot of churches in America today is that the youth ministry is so severed from the rest of the body. And so there isn't that natural blending of generations that's so necessary for the body. And so, you show up at church on a Sunday morning and typically as a family that you say bye to each other because it's mom and dad go this way, little ones go that way, teenagers go that way. And then you meet up after and go to lunch. And then you're typically learning all different things. You're not even studying the same thing. So it is so severed in that way and not really, I think, the way the church should function more as intergenerational. So I think a youth ministry can be can be a huge blessing to be a second voice of what you're trying to teach with your kids. Like I remember with our oldest daughter one night coming home from youth group and saying that her small group leader, she was like, yeah, we were talking, and she was just saying, and I forget specifically what she was talking to our daughter about, but she gave the advice that I had been saying for a while to our daughter. And now hearing it from her youth group, small group leader, it was like, this was such a great idea. And Mom, I think this is so smart. And it took everything in me not to say, I've been saying this to you for years, you know. So sometimes.
And then when I heard you say that, I was like, I've been saying that to you for years. So I had that same temptation, honey.
Yeah. So sometimes those voices, you know, that our kids will listen to, and it's natural for them to, is good. That can be a benefit. But I think, yeah, if the split sometimes of the different generations in the church, I think is troubling, because I spoke at our youth group at our church a couple years ago. They were doing like a sex series, and I was a teen mom, and so they came and had me share my story.
What?
Oh, did I not tell you that?
Did you not tell me that? What the?
But after I was talking with the kids, and then we did some Q&A, and it dawned on me that these students who go to our church didn't realize how many resources they had. And so I said to them, you know, you guys, on Sunday morning when, you know, all of us old people are over there and you guys meet in here, actually almost everyone in there has a story of some kind of sexual brokenness. And they've all been your age and walked through these temptations and struggles. So you're not alone. And there's a bunch of us over there that are here to help you and walk through it with you. You and your parents, or, you know, if your parents aren't believers, there's a whole bunch of adults over here we're for you. And we want to help you, and we've been your age before. And that, to me, was one of those moments where I'm like, gosh, it's such a bummer that we're not more integrated as a body.
Yeah, and that's the downside, I think, of youth groups. And Erin likes to focus on the negative, so I'm going to focus on the positive here. Just a little. Sometimes I'm a more hopeful person. No, so I think that is a serious issue. This kind of, you cordon off the kids, and then they're not incorporated into the life of the body. So they've had this mini church on their own away from big church, and then they graduate, and we're like, all right, throw them into the big church, and they're like, who are these people? And so many churches have this age gap between kind of 18 and 25 to 30, where kids split. And but I think one of the things, a youth group can be a huge ally as well, and so. This is where, as a youth pastor, I think our reflections have been, if we could kind of go back and do it over again, we would focus on theology and apologetics and worldview with kids, really teaching them how to think carefully about their faith, knowing what they believe and why they believe it. Because you just, as a youth pastor, you have such limited time with them compared to like their parents or their teachers. And so what would be the best use of that time? And it's really help grounding them in their faith. And I think, because, you know, I would do those messages on, you know, here are the 3 steps to getting along with your parents or things like that, and those are important things. But often we just simply kind of just teach this moralism, tell them what to do, but they have no foundation that really motivates that on their own. Like, well, why should I do these things to honor my parents? Well, because God said so. Okay, yeah, he did, but there needs to be more than that for the kids. They need to have a robust view of who God is and his nature and character, and moral values, and the fact that there are objective moral values in this world and things like that. So giving them that foundation ultimately, I think, will motivate action, but where it comes from a place of deep faith and deep understanding of their faith. So I think youth groups can be a strong ally in that. And that's what we see at our home church, where our youth leaders really focus on that kind of stuff. And we've seen, as our youth ministry has gotten more serious about the faith and more serious about Bible study and spending significant time studying Scripture, our numbers have actually grown. Not that that is a clear sign of success, but what we've seen is that students are hungry for that. We have students from other churches who kind of have just shallow youth ministries, that it's kind of games and pizza and a nice little moral lesson, that come to our church because there's something deeper there. So all that to say, I think youth ministry right now is probably a mixed bag in the church, but it can be a really great tool for the church.
What's the craziest like object lesson you've ever done as a youth? Like you ever like start up a chainsaw or jump over the stage on a dirt bike?
No, I don't know if he did that, but he did games that for sure we would get sued for today.
Yeah, I think back on my junior high years, and I'm thinking, how did they get away with some of that stuff? Like, I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
For
sure.
The Kunkle family were big pranksters, and so I played
And
pranks.
by we, he means him.
No, I mean my father. It started with my father. It's his fault. My brother.
Did you have an uncle named Uncle Kunkle? Just dawned on me.
His first name was Uncle, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So he was Uncle.
Something about that name.
I have multiple
A lot of teenagers that we work with end up calling you Uncle Kunkle.
Not a lot.
Yeah, a
There were
lot.
like 2 or 3.
There's something about that name.
The older you get, the more it'll be called.
Yeah.
Called Uncle.
The more gray hair.
Most of them call me Master Kunkle. Oh shoot! No, that's I can't say that. That's racist.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
We don't say master
Actually,
on this podcast.
I can't be racist because I'm a person of color.
Yeah.
Right.
So
That's right.
Only you people can.
But yeah, he played games where, we made kids eat live cockroaches. I mean, we played crazy.
Okay.
Gloss over
Let's
that.
give
Hang
some
on.
context.
Let's park
Erin.
there for a second.
Okay, it was the 90s and you got away with more.
Remember?
stuff.
Okay, you guys remember that show Fear Factor?
Yeah.
Well, that was like a big hit
Yeah.
back in the day, and so we thought, hey, let's do a big outreach event with a Fear Factor theme, and we'll use it as a way for kids to bring their friends, make it kind of an evangelistic thing, and so we did. And so we did kind of our own little Fear Factor, and we had the room broken up into different colors when they came in, and then we chose a volunteer from each colored team who's going to represent their team. And so we had a series of challenges. And the first one was like eat a live earthworm. So we filled this aquarium with, like halfway full with earthworms. And so they had to pick one out and swallow that. And so they did. And so the next challenge was
Supposed to dig with their face for a key.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been better. We should. Oh, that's a good idea. Well,
It's
then
too
the
late.
next one was, I think, swallow a goldfish. They all ended up being eating.
They were all
disgusting
terrible.
things. And then the final challenge was eat a Madagascar hissing cockroach.
Holy cow.
Which I didn't know until I picked it up from the pet store. They actually do hiss. They're terrible, scary
Yeah,
insects.
I thought when you
they're
said you
pretty
needed to add some context, so this was going to get better.
No, it just
not
gets
making it
worse.
sound better.
Usually when he says that, he's trying to make you think he's not
Here's
crazy.
some context. They were hissing cockroaches.
They're hissing.
They were like the worst bugs you could possibly have kids eat.
I do sometimes have trouble, like kind of just going to the far extreme. So
He saw it on TV, so he
fish,
thought for sure it'd work.
hissing cockroach. They did it on TV. So anyway, and I think we challenged the kids that if they had so many students, then I would eat one of those. And and then we had an intern who would eat one of them as well. And so they got that many kids there. And one of the kids actually ended up eating it.
The hissing cockroach.
And so then it was our turn, me and the intern, and I literally could not get it in. I was so repulsed by it. I like bit it and it just immediately spit it out.
He wimped out, basically. is
And
what
so
we're saying.
the intern
The intern took one for the team and ate two.
he took 2 for the team.
Wow.
He ate his and then he ate mine. That was actually partially already
And
eaten.
then that
Partially
evening,
crunched.
the intern ends up in the emergency room because one of the feet of the hissing cockroach got stuck on the guy's
they have
throat.
barbs.
Yeah.
And so,
So we left church ministry shortly after that, actually, and changed our names.
It's all in the book. So you guys get their books and stuff.
They were previously the Kokles. They changed their name to the Kunkle.
Yep,
It's disowned.
just a slight change, and so far we haven't had any lawsuits. So
I think maybe the dead cow was probably one that was
yeah,
pretty
What's
high
the
up
did cow?
there. No, I can't talk about it.
he
Okay.
He
You
did
guys-
a prank with a dead cow,
Old
leaving it
Testament
on someone's.
sacrifices. Do like
Yeah, it was an object lesson. It was an object lesson.
burnt offering.
No, honestly, it was. I was doing college ministry with another guy. We were kind of co-leaders of the college ministry.
Oh, this
doing
is real. I
junior
thought
high.
you were like joking.
No,
the,
like
the
he
old dead
really-
cow.
The old dead cow, yeah.
No, really. Actually.
Don't you remember those days back in youth group when you used dead cows?
Spend the night sleeping inside of it. Like, what's the creature on Star Wars?
Tauntaun.
Tauntaun, yeah.
No,
Oh, sorry, I wasn't tracking. Tauntaun.
it was a college group. We had a college event. Me and this other guy co-led it, and he and his wife. Afterwards, the college students were like, "Hey, let's keep hanging out. Let's go do something else." And he and his wife were like, "Oh no," she was. I guess she was pregnant, and she was kind of tired. And he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna take her home." And so then the students are like, they're bummed at him. So they said, "Hey, let's prank him." I was like, "Oh yeah, let's prank him." And I had this idea that had been simmering for a year or two of putting a dead cow on someone's porch. Because I grew up out here in the 909. I grew up in Chino. And
So did
Chino
I.
was
In cow
cow
farm
country, dairy
Did you
country.
Don Lugo or
I went to Don Lugo.
so did I?
You went to Don Lugo?
I did. Yeah.
No way.
way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. What year was that?
I was probably many decades after you, but
Probably. But I did blaze the trail for you.
So if you don't live by cow farms, you don't know, but it's like the trash service.
Yeah, they
but
throw it out on the-
they throw the dead cows out on the street, and then the service comes by and picks them up. So unfortunately, Brett knew this.
I knew
and-
there were dead cows available to
and
us.
had always wanted to do this prank. One of our college
Now,
students
again, can I
had
give
a truck.
context here? Let me give
No,
some
the
context.
context doesn't
context
help.
always
I'm
makes
not
it worse.
sure
Well,
why.
I'll show you how I came to this idea.
they were actually hissing cows.
Did you figure it was like someone leaves a love seat out on the road? It means anybody can take it if they want. Free cow.
Yeah.
It's the same idea.
Yeah.
Probably means they're filled
Well,
with disease.
People need to see how I make these connections. So we had done this junior high event. It was a pool party at this family's house, in our church. And we do the game with the junior hires where we buy like 100 goldfish. They dump them in the pool. It's boys versus girls. They have to jump in and try and catch as many
So much
goldfish as
animal
possible.
torture.
I know. Again, the context isn't helping. And again, I think this is something we'd be sued for today.
Well, if we look at
It's like torturing goldfish.
there's questions of whether or not animals.
You worked in Young Life? Did you work in Young Life?
No, I never.
Oh, okay. I thought I read that. Yeah, I was in Young Life, and there's a lot of goldfish torture going on.
Madagascar hissing goldfish.
I think
So-
the games have changed now in youth ministry
Yeah, they're more politically correct.
for good reason.
But
Sad.
so we had all these you grab a goldfish, you throw it in the bucket. Whatever team has more goldfish wins, right? But at the end of the night, we had this bowl filled with goldfish. Half of them were dead, and I accidentally left it at their house. And so later that night, they came to my house, dumped all the goldfish on our porch, and then rang the doorbell at like midnight and left, right? And they thought it was funny. And I thought, okay, that's a good joke, and I'm going to get you back. And I just thought, all right, I'll just get another animal and I'll put it on your porch. And I knew there were dead cows available. And so
like a
I
lot of
just
work.
went to, okay, I'll put a cow on your porch and now I'll outdo you.
You're saying this like this is logical.
Yeah.
Like the next logical thing is to think I'll find a bigger dead animal than goldfish.
I always go bigger.
Go up to like a mud skipper or something. It's just like a fish with legs. You went way up the evolutionary ladder.
Well,
Which
the arms race really escalated there. We went right to the dead cow.
I mean, I go right to the atomic bomb so that you
So-
will never come back.
So
at me.
this poor guy that we're doing ministry with has no idea what is going on in his mind and these logical steps that he's taken. And then so wants to go home early for his poor pregnant wife. The college students want to do a prank, so Brett suggests
So, yeah,
this
right,
is the
so let's
best
just
prank
be
we could
clear,
possibly do.
The idea originated with the college students, and I just trying to minister to them, and so I said, "Hey, I got this idea. Let's take a." Let's go get a dead cow and we'll put it on his porch.
But like, you need like a forklift or something? How do you do that? That's so
It
much
took
work.
like 4 guys. They put it in the back of the truck.
We found what it was.
Surprise,
the cow we
surprise,
found was a
smelled,
calf,
Smelled terrible.
Oh, okay, that's
and
easier.
it was still. I couldn't believe how heavy the thing was.
I think it was still twitching or something.
It wasn't but it smelled like manure. He put it in the back of his truck, drove it over to their house at whatever midnight, dragged it, through their yard, put it on their porch. And we're like, oh, that's great. And so we went to the local 7-Eleven in the days before cell phones and smartphones and got on the payphone. And one of the college guys called, and their answering machine picked up. And so he left a voicemail, and he said, check your porch. And the pastor was laying in bed, and he had heard the phone ring. He didn't get up to answer, but he could hear the message. So he gets up, and he goes, and he looks out the door, the little eye hole thing, and he can't see it very well. So he thought it was a dead dog. And unbeknownst to me, he had been involved with getting this high school kid at the local high school busted for dealing drugs, and the kid had threatened him. And so he's like putting two and two together.
Oh, man.
Like, they put a dead dog on my porch. So he called the police. The police came and did this full investigation. They measured from the street we had dragged the cow. They listened to the voicemail like 100 times, and
wow.
So it kind of got messy.
I wish I could say that was the only prank he's done that the police have been called, but it's really not. So by God's grace, he's not in jail and with us today.
But I've confessed.
Wow.
This is fantastic.
That was a detour, but I liked it.
That may have just undermined everything I said in this hour. So,
teach your kids Christian worldviews, and drop some dead cows on people's porches.
And don't be afraid to scare them with dead animals.
Before we get into our subscriber, I guess we're just about into our subscriber portion. I did really want to talk about, I'm just curious on just the topic of content. I mean, picking what movies and shows and stuff. I mean, there's kind of a rule of thumb among Christians just to keep it all PG or just watch Christian stuff. Or, I think we both really felt like that didn't serve us well in our youth to only watch the Christian version of things or whatever. I felt like it's kind of a false dichotomy, especially when you go out and find out, oh, these movies are way better or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so how do you navigate that with it? And then we'll go to the subscribe portion after this.
Yeah, I think you absolutely cannot have those kind of PG-13. Let's not let the world set the standards and the bars for what we're going to let our kids watch. Because when our oldest daughter, who's now 25, so she, when she was watching Disney Channel, it was like Hannah Montana and I forget, Lizzie McGuire, some of these old Disney shows, right?
Shows.
So they would have been what were considered PG, but they were the messages in there were absolutely terrible. And when I would sit and watch some of them with her, and even cartoons, so you'll notice in a lot of them, the dumbest people on the show are the parents, typically. Always the adults. It's, the teachers are idiots, the principals, the dad especially is just a moron. And so this is what's common in a lot of kids shows nowadays. And kids pick up on that. And so there's stuff that would be in the G category that I wouldn't want my kids to watch. It's absolute junk. But there might be a PG-13 movie that maybe has some kind of scene in it that's bloody, or I don't know, for some other reason it's got a PG-13 stamp on it. But the messages in it about family or God or whatever are actually really positive, or at least worthy of watching and having a conversation about. So yeah, I don't think we should just as parents just let the world dictate the standards of what our kids are going to watch. We have got to, it's a lot of work and it's exhausting, to be honest, but we have to help our kids navigate these choices, and it can't be a simple rating of PG and R, and how are women portrayed in the show? How are dads portrayed? How is any kind of authority portrayed? And
I think when it comes to what we watch, whether it's a movie or a show or a YouTube video, one thing to help our young people understand is that they're being socialized by the culture. In fact, that's the way that culture influences us in the kind of the most powerful way, is that it simply presents to us what is normal.
Right.
And then we just kind of absorb that and adopt that. So if they're watching show after show after show where parents are viewed as idiots and the kids are the ones who kind of solve the problem and figure things out and have wisdom, that's going to slowly be socialized into them. And so those are the kind of things that I think we look carefully at, or what are the messages? And this is a great movies, because it's such a big part of our lives and culture. It is a great tool to get your kid thinking about what they believe, why they believe it, and constantly looking at the message. So, growing up in Christian culture, often it's, sex, drugs, and violence are like the worst things. Or no, language, sex and language are the worst things. Violence, we kind of give that one a pass. But anyway, so if it has sex or language, well, then it's bad. And this is where we have to go just much deeper and think, hey, number one, what's the worldview, or what are the worldview pieces that are being communicated? So I think the kind of questions that we want to ask of anything that we're watching are questions like, number one, what's the story that's being told here? Who's the hero? Who's the villain? Right? Is it the religious person that's the villain? Is it the LGBTQ, individual who's the hero? So what kind of worldview are they communicating through just the storytelling, and kind of helping to draw out the messages that are communicated? What's the conflict? How is it resolved? And then ultimately saying, okay, how does this compare with a biblical worldview? And because there's a lot of what we would call, quote unquote, secular art, right? That actually have messages that are very consistent with the Christian worldview, and tell the stories most often in a more compelling way than Christians do. We've got to work on that.
Sadly.
And so those kind of things we look at and say, okay, that's the kind of art I want to put in front of my kids. Those are the kind of movies and shows. And if you're looking for criteria as a parent, I mean, think about the true, the good, the beautiful. So is the message true? Is it communicating truths about life? And of course, that's going to assume that we know the truth. So that's where we're going to have to keep growing in our knowledge of the truth of Scripture. But is it true? Okay, then secondly, what it's promoting, is it promoting the good? Right? So it can tell true things, but it may not promote what is good. It may not promote virtue or morality. So for instance, Pixar movies. If you look at a lot of Pixar movies, they promote these virtues through their storytelling. Like in Toy Story, the issue of kind of loyalty amongst friends and sacrifice for friends. That's a key theme, and it's promoted as this good, right? It's this beautiful picture that they paint, and so that's the kind of stuff that we want to put in front of our kids. But sometimes things are, they have truth and they have goodness, but they're just really bad art. And that's often Christian art, right? Or Christian movies. And so there's also this other piece of, hey, what's beautiful too? What's well done? What's good cinematography? And those three criteria then kind of form for us this, what we want to put in front of our kids.
That's true, like good 3 movies. That meet all those.
Yeah.
Just watch them over and over again.
Yeah. That's why I just show my kids Braveheart all the time.
Yeah, Braveheart again.
Lord of the Rings, all day, every day.
All day.
That's what I heard out of that. I don't know.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that's my question though. Like, this movie or show doesn't align with my worldview. Do you just not watch it, or do you watch it and try to talk about it, or where do you? Because there's going to be things they want to watch.
Yeah,
they're going to hit a point where they can watch anything they want, and you want them to be able to watch with discernment.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's the surfing analogy. How do you get them to be ready to jump into that?
Yeah. I remember after we took all the kids to see Moana when that came out, and so that was
Did you really want to just admit that publicly? Before we did that?
Our youngest daughter really wanted to see Moana.
I thought you were a Christian.
Sad.
So that's the perfect example of a movie where it's safe to go see it, right? But there's so many messages in that movie that we wanted to talk about with our kids, and even driving home. So we talked about some of the ideas about where things were created and who had the power, and all of those sorts of things. But even I said to our daughter, it was a bummer that for Moana to do the right thing, which was to save her village, right? She had to disobey her dad. And I said, did you notice that? Like, for her to do what was right, she had to go against her dad. And they kind of made her dad like the bad guy in the movie because he was like, no, stay. But the village needed to be saved. So Moana disobeys dad, does it. She's the hero. Dad was wrong. Yay, movie's over.
Oh, yeah.
So just having that discussion, and that's where as parents we got to watch just to pick up on messages like that. And then, yes, I mean, she loved Moana. Moana's great. But even just talking through, and I said, wouldn't it have been cool if her dad was like, Moana, you have courage. Why don't you go and do this? Like, why not? Wouldn't it have been cool if her dad actually encouraged her in doing something courageous and good? And then she listened to her dad and did it. Wouldn't that have been cool? And so even just talking through Disney movies or G-rated things of just walking through the story and thinking, how did they portray, these people? And as our kids have gotten older, for example, they love to watch The Office. These are our older kids, and we love The Office. And just talking to them about how is the one Christian in that show portrayed?
Yeah.
Angela.
Yeah.
And she's got some issues, right? And it's not, we're not going to not let our kids watch The Office, and again, we're talking about older kids here, but we're just having that conversation. Did you guys notice, like, the only Christian in that show she's a total stiff. She's a cat lady, she's just like, there's some,
and she
she's
reads
one of the
Purpose-Driven Life. That was one of the episodes. But I think what Erin's describing is what the term that we've used for it is narrating. It's like you're as you're living life with your kids, you're narrating for them what's going on, and you're helping them to develop eyes to see these things. And so that's why it's so important for us to know the Christian worldview, so that we can be more effective in narrating. And so it's like, you see a Disney princess movie, and pretty much that's a theme of every Disney princess movie, right? Go against what your father says. Yeah. I mean, that's Mulan, Little Mermaid, Brave. Whatever. I don't
Brave.
Know. Yeah, Brave.
Oh, yeah.
And so you just narrating for that helps our kids to not just be these passive, kind of sponges that just absorb this stuff and then get socialized by it, but it helps insulate them. So it's not, hey, we're not going to expose you to this. We're going to expose you to things at appropriate ages and levels, but we're going to help you see it and discern truth from error. Because there are some movies that there are some really good messages, and in the same movie, there's some really bad messages. So do we just take that off the table? No, we want ultimately for them to develop a mature enough faith where they can see both and reject the false ideas and messages, but embrace the truth in there. So I think it just means that we have to be more thoughtful. We need to be better critical thinkers. We need to have a robust Christian worldview to help our kids navigate this more effectively.
My parents wouldn't let me watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles growing up.
Why?
And my mom's listening to this podcast, so
Missed out.
I want you to tell my mom that she was wrong.
Basically did.
Well, basically, they let us watch the first movie, and we came home and just started punching each other. So no more.
You never would have done that otherwise.
Yeah, like we discovered punching through Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, you had never done that.
There's a lesson. Like, why does that appeal to boys in particular? Do boys have
patriarchy?
Male supremacy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or it could be that boys have a certain kind of nature that's different than girls. And
Canceled.
Problematic.
Canceled. I just ended our ministry right there with that statement.
Kind of nature that would drag a giant cow into somebody's porch.
Exactly.
Exactly. When I tell that, I mean, so guys are usually like, "Oh, that's so cool," and then
women are always like
appalled.
They think of you differently every time.
Yeah, but
they're like, you are a savage person.
They have more sympathy for you.
They do, actually. That's true.
Are we ready to go into our subscriber portion?
Yeah, I'd love to talk in our subscriber portion. I would love to get into, you guys are both cigar smokers, which is fascinating to me.
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
Both of us.
Yeah, that's the weirdest part. That's awesome. Kind of weird envy, but and then also what was I also going to talk about? Oh yeah, so when you married, you said she was a single mom. I married a single mom, and I would love to talk a little more about that because I think it's not talked about a lot in Christian circles. It's we were talking a little bit about how sometimes it's a little stigmatized. So we'd love to talk some about that too, and then whatever Kyle wants to talk about, I guess. Star Wars,
then we're
probably.
going to ask the 10 questions.
And the 10 questions.
That everybody always loves to hear.
I love those 10 questions.
10 questions.
Yep.
If people want to find out more about Maven and what you guys do, where can they go?
I can go to our website, which is maventruth.com.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Don't go to mavenlies.com.
Yeah. That was one disgruntled guy from Maven that created that.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's the guy who Brett left the cow on his porch.
He's the Madagascar cockroach rights activist.
Yeah. We wanted Maven.
Hissing cockroach.
We wanted Maven.com, but it was like this car.
It's like a rental car
Airbnb
company.
for cars. But
yeah.
apparently
What?
they're going under. I don't know.
Airbnb for cars? You can sleep in the car?
No, you can rent out your car. No, I'm meaning that you can, if you have a car, you
don't
can
have
rent it
enough
out.
for
to
a regular Airbnb. So
I'm parked at the Arby's on 9th. You can sleep in there if you need to.
So that's not associated with you?
no,
Just to be clear.
Apparently the
we
company
don't
is-
rent cars. We don't do anything
Well, our donor
Airbnb.
base has been kind of low, so we've had to. No, apparently they're going under. So I'm going to look into getting Maven.com.
So
All
this
right.
could be looking up
Yeah.
for us that
Yeah,
they're
this could
going
be-
under.
Yeah.
Glad they went under. Glad all those people lost their jobs. No.
All right. Well, if you want to indoctrinate your children into a Christian worldview or rent a car, check out
Maven Truth or Maven?
Truth or Maven, either one. And bye, freeloaders.
Goodbye. Get out of here. Go hit up the dollar menu.
Coming up next for Babylon Bee subscribers.
I want you to call me Hunkle from now on. You can't call me Kunkle.
That is definitely not happening. Usually by the end of these conversations, people have a lot of sympathy for me. Before I could answer, this guy says, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
We don't want to just sit down on the couch next to each other and have a conversation for an hour. But literally just put a cigar in those fingers and suddenly it's on.
Magically.
Did you pay them to say all this so your
Yeah.
wife will listen to this?
I'm hoping she'll listen. I don't know. Probably going to help. But
Enjoying this hard-hitting interview? Become a Babylon Bee subscriber to hear the rest of this conversation. Go to babylonbee.com/plans for full-length, ad-free podcasts. Kyle and Ethan would like to thank Seth Dillon for paying the bills, Adam Ford for creating their job, the other writers for tirelessly pitching headlines, the subscribers, and you, the listener. Until next time, this is Dave DeAndrea, the voice of the Babylon Bee.
Still
Trying to
ineffective.
block the chin.
he's covering his chin up.
Oh, that's what he wanted to see. He wanted to display the chin.
Gonna have to censor it.
Have like a little black box. If I go like this, it does look like
Goatee.
a butt chin.
Christian podcast.
Hey, you got to just go to those little soul patches.
The soul patch.
You're so
I
embarrassed.
can moon your audience.
My gosh.
Wow, it's the first
was your
obscene moment.
Is that a
Where
first?
were we? What was your
Oh
thought?
my gosh.
Okay, so